upgrade's going to be here pretty quick.
Oh my God. Is that what I think it is?
Mm-hmm.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
Relax.
Oh, I'm relaxed. I am so totally relaxed. It's just make-believe!
Hello. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world when you watch this. If you're watching it live, it's 8. This is Queens Live at 8. My name is Mr. M. I am a board member here at the Queens World Film Festival. This is on behalf of the Queens World Film Festival. And this is our interview series with filmmakers and film associates of the Queens World Film Festival. So I will be taking over for News for the week. Salute to my guy News, my fellow board member. And today we have the pleasure of talking with not only the founder, one of the founders of the Queens World Film Festival, but also a filmmaker himself, Preston Cato. Preston Cato, or as I like to call him, the Don. All right. So that was his film. All right. You just saw a trailer for, and it is called Be My Oswald. So we're going to have a good conversation about that today. And that film was recently re-released via the film festival circuit. And it was played this year on Queens World Film Festival 2022, which is the 12th annual. And you can also watch it as part of our virtual leg of the festival. The link is in the description. All right. So without further ado, enough of me. Let's bring on the man of the hour, Mr. Preston Cato. How you doing?
I'm fine.
Good.
Yeah, that's a giggle.
Yeah, good to see you. It's always good to see you.
Well, it's good to see you and good to be seen.
Absolutely. So I have a few questions about this film. You know, the we're gonna have a regular conversation as well, but I do have some questions about this film.
Sure.
And I want to start with this. I just want to start with this. Who wrote this I don't know what to call it yet, so we'll get to that too later on. I don't know what to call it, but it's definitely a piece of art, right? But it's a would you be offended if I call it a twisted piece of art, huh? Would you?
Not at all. Thank you.
All right. So who wrote this twisted piece of art?
Well, the version that's on the screen is I wrote that. I can give you the further evolution of it, but what's on the screen is what I wrote.
We'll get to that then. You're a madman. You're a madman for this film, just like myself. Because
yeah.
I when I watched this film, and I haven't just watched it for the first time. I've seen it in the past, but I kind of get kind of an idea of why my first film was accepted so well by yourself and Cato, right? Because we like to think outside the box, right?
Yeah.
We like to think outside the box, right? So my follow-up question to that was, what inspired this film? Because if you really can't tell everything that the film is about in the trailer, because there's a lot of plot twists, but basically it's what genre would you put it in? First and foremost, what genre would you put it in?
I don't think it fits in any particular genre.
I agree.
It's a mix.
I agree.
It's just this is the form that the story took.
Right. So with that being said, it's safe to say that it's crime, it's a drama, but it's also comedy. Because I found myself laughing, but I didn't know if I was supposed to laugh.
Exactly.
Right. There you go.
That's right.
So what inspired it? What inspired this, and what's the synopsis? Like, what can we say about the film without giving it away?
Well, it's a plot to assassinate Santa Claus.
There we go.
That's it. I mean, that's all there is to it.
There we go. So you all right? I didn't know if I was supposed to give it away. So there you go. It's a film about a plot to kill Santa Claus. All right.
Yeah.
Happy holidays, everybody. So with that being said, what inspired this? What would make you want to write a film about killing Santa Claus, or a plot to kill Santa Claus?
Well, so late 97, 98, back in the late 90s, 1900s, 1997. Had been over 10 years since I'd made a feature film. And Cato said, well, you know, it's about time we did something. Okay, so I thought, well, okay, what are we going to do? And conversations came up, and a friend of ours who's a playwright, and he said, well, why don't you come down to the show I've got running on, I think it was Mulberry Street or somewhere in the Lower East Side, Fringe Festival. And we said, great. And it turned out it was about two women in a small space, and they were going to assassinate the president.
Right.
And so I thought, well, you know, this is for an inexpensive kind of get your chops back up. This isn't a bad idea. It's a couple characters. They've got an interesting objective. Well, so let's see what I can do with it. So I purchased the rights to the play and the rights to do anything I wanted with it. It wasn't called Be My Oswald.
Right.
I don't even remember what the title was. And brought it back and started to work on it. And I thought, well, who in the world wants to see anybody trying to attempt to shoot the president? I mean, there's been so many movies about attempts to assassinate a president here, a president there, our president. It's happened, but nothing comes of it. I mean, it's just an interesting thing, maybe.
Right.
Was just, I guess it could have been around Thanksgiving time. Was just kind of wondering, what am I going to do? I can't commit myself to something like this. And I went, what's the target? What's the target, and what is the purpose? And I went, aha, Santa Claus.
Like that. Santa
Claus. Now, how then do I have to build a story around it? That. I mean, because after all, Santa Claus, you know, doesn't exist.
Right.
So how do you shoot something that doesn't exist?
Right.
And so it came about to, how do you kill a myth? I mean, that's like a big idea. How do you kill a myth or a legend? I mean, it's, you know, it's a legend. It's a myth. How do you kill a myth? And that took me back to a John Ford film, The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance, and some other ideas about how do you deal with legend and truth. So that's where I started. I said, how do you kill a myth? And how do you kill one of the biggest myths that we have on the planet?
Right. That's a really interesting story. And you did a great job at telling that story. And the film itself was very well done. What year did you say you made this film?
Well, it started, we got our first shots off in 1998. And we completed the shooting in March of 2002, I think. And the why so long? Well, one, it was an independent film.
Right.
And two, you know, the initial thinking is it's an independent film, so all we need is a kind of a rundown space. We don't need anything that's fancy. You know, the worse the space looks like, like a 5 or 6 floor business space somewhere in Manhattan or any borough that looks like it's been torn apart, ready to be rebuilt. So we needed just a raw space. Well, that turned out to be the most difficult location to locate and pay for. we had insurance possibilities. We had money to rent the space, and it was nearly impossible to find a big space for 2 weeks. And so I had to shoot around it, shoot all the exteriors, all of the other spaces that were involved, and make them look like they were all put together in one, which is what you do with a movie.
Right.
And it took quite a while to find that space. And finding that space came about purely by accident because I was looking for an editor. And you know how you go walk along and you find that someone says, "Hey, one apartment for rent, no dogs," or something. You pull off a little tear thing.
Hmm.
Well, that's what I found. I tore one of these things off, and I called the number, and a fellow by the name of Patrick Dorena answered the phone, and he was in the Film Center building on Ninth, and basically a little closet on the fourth floor. And we were editing pieces of this, and he was really a very good editor. We became great friends, and I told him what I was doing because I'd shot everything but the space.
Right.
And he said, that's interesting." Time passed, and he says, "Hey, by the way," after some time, he says, "I've rented some. I'm thinking about renting a space up here on the ninth floor, or I have rented a space on the ninth floor. It's going to be the Digital Film Academy."
Wow.
I said, "Great." And he says, "So you want to take a look?" I went, "Sure, I'd love to." So we go to the ninth floor, we walk in, and here's this completely trash space with some forms up and stuff, not construction going on, wires hanging all over the place. And he says, "What do you think?" I said, "This is incredible." He said,
Right.
"Yeah, it is." He said, "I think it's going to make a really good school." I said, "No, my location.
Is what
We
you
have
was
to
looking
move for editing."
for. Yeah. It's what you was looking for the whole time.
That was right there. And I said, "I need this. 2 weeks. I need 2 weeks in here." And it worked out a rate. And I had 21 days to raise, I don't know, $37,000 to get into the space and hire people, et cetera, and so on.
So this space, which is the bulk of the film, right? There's a lot of a lot of it leads up to that part, but that's the whole bulk. Like I would say, at least middle to end of the film, right?
Yeah, right.
So you're saying this space is what will become the digital film, like the location for the Digital Film Academy?
Yeah, it's been there ever since.
That's amazing.
That's what I say.
It,
It's and then the challenge is, and if you look at uh, Cindy Lumet, for example, with 12 Angry Men. This is not 12 Angry Men.
right.
But what do you do in a confined space? And what does, and then there's a movie called A Phone Booth.
Mhm.
So the challenge then becomes, well, here you've got this idea, you have an idea that you're working on, and it deals with how do you kill a myth, and and then you find I'm in a space, and how do you treat that landscape? How do you move the story around in the space so it's not just a space? And so
Right.
how do you start to define all the parts that lead up to the space and are in the space and what corner? So it became a spatial challenge to use the space and reveal it slowly.
Well, that's it. That's funny you say that because that's one of the things I wanted to talk about. The film language in this project is amazing, right? It's very well done. You definitely use the hell out of that space. And what I want to also hear about is the shots leading up to the space. A lot of that was outside in New York City. This is a time, like you said, this is the late '90s, early 2000s. Cameras are really big; they're not small yet, and um, what was that like? Like, how did you get a lot of those shots in the city? Did you get film permits? Did you guerrilla film some of those shots?
Well, some were permits, very few,
Hmm.
and then um, the rest was, all the exteriors are 16 millimeter,
Hmm.
16 millimeter with a boom, and double sound system,
Right.
and and I intended that way so that the beginning of the film okay. It looks kind of like a normal movie, kind of, the textures and the color and the way we colorized it.
Right.
And so you sort of lulled into relative comfort, and then suddenly it takes the right turn, just jerks the wheels right underneath you,
Right.
and both style and the media used to capture at that time as well.
Right. Wow. So, um, the streets of New York City. So you were where were you raised again?
Well, I was raised way upstate New York in Fredonia, which is about 45 miles south of Buffalo,
Hmm.
almost on Lake Erie, right in the snow belt.
Hmm. So filming in the city, was that like a bucket list thing for you? Like, did it feel like, wow, I'm filming a movie and it's smack dead in the middle of Manhattan right now?
Well, I did want to make something in the city. Now, whether or not that was a bucket list, I don't know.
Hmm.
But when I was a kid, my dad bought me a shortwave radio,
Hmm.
and it had AM and FM on it. And when I was a kid, I would listen to WABC, and I'd listen to stations here in New York, way upstate. And I used to even in junior high school, I used to read the New York Times
Right.
and look at it and go, oh, and open those pages and see all those movies and see everything that was going on. And so I don't know if I was destined to be here, but here I am.
It sounds like it. It sounds like it, and it sounds like that had to feel like a really great accomplishment, right? Like I said,
Well, it did. I mean, you kind of pinch yourself.
yeah. Like I said, like now all of the cameras are like super small, and people can get away with doing the most, and they don't even realize how much struggle had to go into actually producing a film in the time that you produced this film, right?
Yeah.
So to be able to accomplish to film that type of film in that time, that's a big accomplishment.
Well, there's a couple of really beautiful shots right around the Plaza Hotel.
Exactly. I saw that. Yep.
And uh, and so we used our SUV. We put our camera person Joe DeLilio, bless his heart, he's passed. He got his master's degree from NYU. He's a New York City police officer and started, I believe, what he said was the New York City Motion Picture Department.
Wow.
And he was a great guy, and so he was our DP, and he was good at shooting on the run. And so I don't know how many takes we had to do, but we had to drive by the front of the plaza, and then we needed another shot of the plaza for a different time.
Hmm.
We had to wait for time to pass, and so we're moving up the steps, and I'm telling my actress where to go, Jeannie Noss Gaffigan, telling where to go. And after about 3 shots, I said, well, let's get one more. And this giant guy in a black suit and tie, he comes down and he said, what are you doing? And I said, shooting a student film.
That's the answer. That's the right answer.
And he looked at me, and I had gray hair, whatnot. And he looked at me, he just turned his head, and I went, would you believe a graduate student film? And he just went like this, get off of here. He just pointed, and I said, okay.
Yeah, because that's the subtext of my question, right? Because I'm like, I know it couldn't have been easy in that time, getting these shots right with the equipment needed at that time.
Yeah.
You know, I remember getting kicked off of the West Side Highway because we had a boom.
Yeah. Ooh.
Yeah, they say if you got a boom in a tripod, you got to go. Yeah,
that's permit weather.
yeah, exactly. So you told us a little bit about where you came from, where I am similar, where I'm close to where I am now. I'm upstate now. So tell us about your background. What were you doing before this film? So you said you didn't produce a film in 10 years previous to this film. What's your background in film? Because like I said, the film language, the project was produced very well, and you can tell there's even though you were thinking outside the box, you can tell that there's a lot of education put into this project. A lot of
Thank you.
Yeah. So what were you doing previous to this project?
Oh, well, I made a film in 1980, shot in 86. It was released in 88. It was called Dixie Lanes. It was the budget was $3.2 million, which took me a while to raise. And I didn't raise it all, but I had a producing, I worked and found some other producers, and we ended up shooting a film for about 2.8, but that's how much cash we spent.
Right.
But there was about $700,000 in outstanding uh, bills or accounts due.
Right.
Anyway, that was the feature film. It took me a long time to write that, try and get it produced, get it there. And I was the director, and get that. It finally got released, and things. A very independent film. If you think about it, an independent film in 1986, totally independent.
Right.
I mean, you were out there on a wire,
Right.
and ending up spending $2.8 million with a great cast.
Right.
And it was a CBS Movie of the Week twice.
Wow.
And played in 40 countries. Miramax distributed.
Right.
Anyway, long story short, you know how it goes in independent worlds, how contracts are worked and reworked, and sometimes things fall apart.
Mm-hmm.
And so between 1988 and 1989, you know, Cato and I met and got married. I worked on her show, Foreplay Improvised Theater, and we ran for almost a year at the Producers Club on 9th Avenue.
Yeah.
And 44th.
Basically, right down the block from where you end up filming this movie, right?
That's right. Mm-hmm. And I can remember in those in the shows were, you know, there were 5 shows a week, and all of them were improvised, and it was an incredible experience. And Catholic, this group did very well. Catholic got Best Director, a Bistro Award for that, and Best Comedy Group won the very first MAC Association of Cabaret Awards. Right. And we would hang out in that neighborhood. And I remember sitting in what used to be the Film Center Cafe across from the Film Center. And I was thinking, I said, God, you know, it'd be kind of cool one day to work in that building over there. So that was before before the Digital Film Academy or before Oswald or any of that. It was just saying that'd be a cool place to be, you know, Film Center. Wow. Anyway, so that was in 86, 87. Prior to that, I lived in Oregon from 72 to 86. And for a while, I got a degree. I got a master's degree in landscape architecture from the University of Oregon. Then I was in the art department studying motion graphics for the better part of almost 2 years, and I left I didn't finish my degree because I was making movies.
Right.
And I was getting a lot of work. I had made an animated film that played around the world and won a bunch of awards. And one day my professor said, "What are you doing here?" And I said, "Well, what I'm doing is I'm earning my degree." He said, "But what are you doing here?" Right. I said, "Well, I'm your assistant." And he goes, "Yeah, okay, but what are you doing when you're not here?" I said, "Well, I have a lot of projects to do." And he said, "Well, school is where you learn to do those things. And if you're already doing it, don't you think maybe somebody else might like to be here?" And I thought about that for a while, and that's why I left the program, because I was making documentaries, short films, TV advertisements. I was getting a lot of work in Eugene, Oregon.
Right.
And after I had made a bunch of stuff, and I made a lot of experimental films. I was just playing around, and with 16 millimeter, I put a Super 8 camera on the wing of an airplane and flew it around and took pictures of that. And
Wait, you flew the plane?
No, I did not fly the plane. It was a wing over. I believe it was called an Aeronca. Mm-hmm. And I choreographed a flight up the Willamette Valley. And while we were doing a test flight, just to see how it works, he said, "I want to show you something. You know, this plane glides really well." When I shut off the engine, I said, "What?" So he shut the engine off. I'm just, okay. And we're just floating along really nice and smooth. And I'm just going, the engine's off. I said, when are you going to turn it back on again? And, those sorts of things. So that was fun.
Man.
So I made a lot of films between 1972 and 1979, 1980.
Mm-hmm.
And before that, when I was in Boston, I was where I went to work after I graduated from Michigan State, where I got 2 degrees in landscape architecture, and I took geography and film history on the side. And when there was a place at the end of Bow and Arrow Street, which is where I worked. And I love that, Bow and Arrow.
Yeah.
Right next to the Lampoon building, there was a little red door, and it was the Orson Welles Film School.
Wow.
And I thought, well, why don't I? It's just up the street from where I'm working. So I spent 18 months taking courses at the Orson Welles Film School, and that was all Super 8 at that time. They were 16 millimeter, but I couldn't afford that.
And wait, so you took up landscaping before you took this course, correct?
Oh yeah, let's see, I got registered as a landscape architect in 1972.
Right. And you were making films before you took this class at this film school, correct?
Well, I think some film history courses, and that's about it.
So as far as production goes, and for a lot of it, you were self-taught.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, as a landscape architect, I acquainted. The processes are similar. You get an idea, and you have a space, whatever the space might be, a huge space or a small space, a pocket park,
mm-hmm.
a street. Any landscape architects do any number of things to huge land management. And I worked for a company that at one time was doing a master plan for Sardinia. Wow. So a master plan for the whole place called Sardinia. And that's the kind of planning that goes on. So I worked on very small projects, and I did that when I worked for Lansing Parks and Recreation, and worked on the zoo, picnic areas, baseball fields, those kinds of things. And on the side, myself and this former Peace Corps guy, we designed and built drop-in center for kids on the north side of Lansing, which meant the immigrant population who had nowhere to go. And so we found this warehouse, and because of his Peace Corps history, he scavenged everything from pool tables to basketball nets, and my job was to help design and find some of the materials to make this thing work. So I was doing that as well. So it's a design process. Motion pictures are a design process.
Absolutely.
The screenplay is your plan, and it has its beginning and its middle, its end. Landscapes are supposed to be experienced, and as you walk through them, it changes, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Or wherever that might be, and it changes with the seasons. It changes with the day. It changes with the weather and things. The color changes, and there's different vistas off and this way, off of this way, and that's a movie.
Right.
So you're experiencing time and space. So it seemed like a natural transition, although I probably wasn't thinking of that at the time, but looking back, that's really kind of what happens.
It really is a natural transition, but at the same time, it's also a testimony to the fact that you were always a filmmaker at heart. So, that was a great transition, one that would, rightfully prep you for what you would be doing. But I think even if you was flipping burgers at Burger King, you would be writing scripts in your head, right? Because you're a natural filmmaker, right? But that's a hell of a story, and that's really impressive.
Yeah.
That's really
I didn't start as a writer. I mean, I'm a very visual person. And I would just go, this is the thing I need. And I'm very good at, once I see, I have to be on the location many times to go, this is what I need, and I'll figure it out. And this is what we're going to do. And here's the camera.
Mm-hmm.
And um, I would go. So I drew maps. I drew little diagrams, and even in my more involved pieces that I was hired to make, I ended up doing it like a plan. And I remember the film that I got started on. I drew this huge map, and I said, "This is supposed to happen here, and this is here." And it was a road picture. It was a college dope film,
Mm-hmm.
and I thought, here's the this is the story, and this is the routes they're going to take to make these things happen and make their discovery and get into trouble and uh, all of that. And someone said, "Well, wait a minute, you can't shoot that." I said, "Well, I can shoot that." Yeah, but I said, "I know exactly what it looks like." And they said, "Well, you have to write a screenplay." I said, "Well, what do you mean, screenplay?" English is not my greatest language when it comes to writing.
Right.
Pictures, pictures. And a friend of mine said, "Well, I have a friend of mine who's going to the AFI in Oregon, and he's from Oregon, and I'll introduce you to him." And he did, and that became my writing partner. That's how I learned how to write a screenplay. Is I had to hire someone to help me write my story.
Right.
And in the hiring of him, who's going to the AFI in the master's program, I learned how to write screenplays.
Right.
We wrote a lot of them until we wrote the one that got made into a feature, Dixie Lanes. And then everything stopped when my participation in Dixie Lanes went like this. I mean, other people's went on to their careers, and they should.
Mm-hmm.
One of the people in the movie was Pam Springsteen,
Wow.
Bruce's sister. She was
Right.
great, terrific. And so nothing happened between 91, 92, and 97.
You know what I think that was? If I can be bold enough to give my input on that.
Sure.
I like you. I'm self-taught, right? But I did take up courses here and there. I took a class here and there. When I was in college, I took advantage of the video audio technology department, right? But it wasn't my official major. I just was always in there renting the camera out to do things with my student organization. And, like similar to you, everything I was doing led me to what I would do. But when I made my first film, which you're very familiar with, right?
I am.
It was a labor of love, and I was self-taught. And then I read what I had to read. I researched what I had to research. I partnered with who I had to partner with, co-producers who had degrees in film, etc. But I was a natural producer, and hence the film coming to completion. But then there was a time where things kind of stood still for me. And I feel like because of the type of people you and I are, we were able to kind of skip the line, if that makes sense.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah.
But then you kind of got to sit back down because those people we skipping, they took all of the steps from 0 to 100. So what happens is those people, they seemingly keep moving, but really they're just taking the next step and the next step. And we kind of got to sit back and kind of find our lane and learn a little more and reflect on what we did and, do other small projects like you were speaking of and continue to work at it. And then eventually we come back and show what we made of, right? Like you did with Beat as well, right?
Yeah, right. Because that's just the way it is. It couldn't be more independent.
Right.
But, independent's a weird word because you become so dependent on so many other things.
Exactly.
You depend on the kindness of others sometimes.
Absolutely.
And that has to be rewarded with kindness.
Right.
Whatever that might be, whether it's the right kind of work, the best opportunity you can give, payment, and meet your obligations and treat people right because it's a tough thing to do.
And paying it forward, right? Like you did for me, right? Like you and Cato did for me, paying it forward, right? yeah, you know, giving somebody else the information that you were able to come across and giving them a shot.
Mhm.
So, because a lot of times our blessings come from not who we think they're going to come from, and not at a time we even expect it, but from left field. And a lot of times that's somebody else paying it forward, and you got to do the same. So you got to find somebody that you may not know from a hole in the walls and just invest in them, like you guys invest in all of these filmmakers with the Queens World
Yeah,
Film Festival.
yeah, and that is what we pride ourselves in. By that's a hard word to use, but we take comfort.
Yeah,
We take comfort in helping filmmakers. And I say we like risky ideas. We like a really good idea, no matter how it's done.
right,
I mean, that comes from our background. I mean, but therefore, well, not everybody can use an Aeroflex. So you have to use the tools you have,
right.
whatever they might be. We had a film this year, Lorenzo, I believe. Um, right. And his film was shot in 87
Hmm.
on 35 millimeter. And he had a restoration of it. Well, he finally got it put together,
Hmm.
shot it in Cuba. And it's not the greatest, super duper sharp 35 millimeter because it's so many generations, right? But it's the idea is so well done, and it's a piece of history of something that happened at that time,
Right,
and therefore you have to see it. And something that somebody's been working on since '87.
right, right. They're definitely going to put their heart into it and their soul into it. Absolutely, and all of that time is going to reflect and it's going to show. And like you said, documented the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I skipped over it, and I want to shout out Cato, who's in the chat. She says Preston Cato is a boss, is the boss. Excuse me. So she spoke. You spoke about when you met her, and she was an actress, and she was doing theater, and you brought this script eventually, right? That you were able to film down the block from where she had her. Can I call it a residency?
Well, yeah, we were there for yeah, almost a year.
Yep, yep, exactly. And so what I want to ask you, because she was one of the main characters in this film, right?
Uh-huh.
What was it like working with your wife? And was she your wife yet?
Yeah,
What was it like working with your wife?
it was great.
Yeah, on such an artistic project, right?
Well, yeah, she's a professional,
She is.
and she understood who the character was,
Hmm.
and we knew where the boundaries were. I mean, she was one of the producers, so I mean, she was doing that and acting.
Hmm.
I'm a writer and a producer, but I'm the director, and so that's the way it worked out. And everybody was collaborating, so we all had ideas. Here's the script. And your job is to bring that interpretation over here. Some of these things have to be said a certain way because it's part of the structure. But
Hmm.
other things that you can bring, maybe there's another way to say the same thing.
Right.
And so you're bringing your craft uh, to this piece, knowing who your character is, and she's excellent at that. And she's a good actor.
She really is. She really killed that role. And when I say killed, I mean in a good way, right? But
Yes.
she really did her thing in that role. But with that being said, the other main actress, what was her name again?
Well, at the time it was Jeannie Knopf,
Hmm.
but it's now Jeannie Knopf Gaffigan, Jim
Okay.
Gaffigan's wife.
Did Katha and her work together previously to that film?
Yeah, we knew each other from um, after foreplay improvised theater,
Right.
and before we shot this, Katha had met Jeannie,
Hmm.
and I can't remember where, um, but they were friends.
Right.
And I remember during the film, all I can remember was Jeannie said, "Well, she met this really interesting guy. He happens to be a comedian." And I mentioned his name, and in 1997, 1998, it was like, "Oh, that's cool. That's really cool." Oh, Catherine just said Jeannie was Katha's student.
Oh wow. Okay. Okay. So So a lot of the film was just them two,
Yeah,
right? And them playing off each other and acting together. Um, they really had opportunity to shine in the sense where they were able to use their skills as like theatrical, or theater actresses in that film, right? So it was like, even though it was a film, it felt like you were watching them on stage for some of the film, right?
well, that's the way it was shot.
Right.
Hmm.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
really,
it is. It's
I
like,
really enjoyed that. I really enjoyed that. Not to
yeah,
cut. What were
yeah.
you gonna say? What were you gonna say? I cut
No,
you off.
no, that's it. Sometimes it is presentational like that,
Hmm.
the way it's shot. Because it was, uh, I wrote down everything I needed to have, and then when I got to the space, I threw it out the book, out the window, and just said, "This is the way I'm going to do it."
Right.
And worked out. It worked out fine. It was,
It worked out really good. It worked out great.
yeah. And people, and you say you didn't. There were places where you didn't know if you're supposed to laugh or not, and it's pretty much the way it worked. I mean, either you get it or you don't get it. I mean, we did run theatrically for, I don't know, 10 days. Did a theater downtown, not far from the film archives, right around in that part of the Lower East Side or the East Side.
You mean the one like right around the corner?
Yeah, what used to be called the Pioneer Theater.
Yeah, I'm familiar. I did a lot of screenings at the Film Anthology Archives, but there definitely theaters right down the block.
Yeah, it was an independent theater, and you could rent, which you did.
Hmm.
So we four-walled it in that theater.
Yeah.
So we ran for like 10 days, maybe. We paid for the theater, and the theater owner keeps the popcorn. And we get the ticket sales, which that's not the point.
Right.
And we hired a professional. Uh,
You call it like a publicist or?
yeah, a kind of yeah, very professional. He'd done Lord of the Rings and all these other films,
Mhm.
and he cost more than the rental did. But but he got us 8 reviews.
Great.
One of them was the New York Times, and so and I remember seeing our review in the New York Times. We got a color picture,
Wow.
like a quarter of a page.
Right.
I mean, that alone, not
That's
quite
really
a quarter page, not that alone cost you a lot of money in those days.
Yeah.
And that review was mixed, but I love it. It was a New York Times.
Right.
And so the reviews were, I think we got 4 love letters. 2 were mixed. And I think 2 people wanted to kill me.
Were they mad because of the idea of Santa Claus?
Yeah, they just thought it was they just hated it. I mean, they hated it.
You know what I like to say, Preston? I like to say, great art is either like people are gonna love it or hate it.
Yeah, they just thought. I remember the awful things they wrote. Oh my God, they couldn't think. And one of the great moments was we had a pretty good house one night,
Mm-hmm.
and this guy came in, and he was about 6'1", 6'2", big guy, in this huge tub of popcorn.
Mm-hmm.
One of these ultra giant sized sodas.
Right.
And Catherine and I are standing there, and we watched him come in, and he took his ticket, and we looked at each other and went, "Oh man, we're screwed," because he was going in there, and the idea was this is gonna be,
Holiday film or something.
yeah. And we watched him come out of there. He was like, oh, and he slaughtered us. But that's when we thought maybe we should change our advertising.
Hilarious. So, what was the advertising at that time? Were you
Well,
was Santa Claus in the advertising?
well, it was more towards comedy than dark comedy.
Okay.
And so our lesson as we were learning was that there's no question We shouldn't even mention comedy. We shouldn't mention dark comedy. It can't be presented as that. It has to be something that could be just taken in any way.
Right. Yeah.
But,
Well,
but towards the dark side.
exactly. Because I mean, to me, it was definitely a lot of dark humor in there, right?
Very dark.
But when I was laughing, I was like, oh man, am I twisted? Or am I for laughing at this, or is this supposed to be funny, right?
No,
But
it is.
it was all right. Cool. So I'm a little sane. All right, cool. That's cool.
Yeah. Well, that's it. And our European audiences were fine. They get it.
I'm sure. I'm sure. But speaking of that face that they get when they come out of the theater, getting something that they didn't expect.
Yeah.
I've seen that face. I've seen that face, as you can imagine. So, and I've definitely gotten the mixed reviews. It was amazing, and I hate that film. So I've
Really.
but that she said it's a twisted tale. It really is. And speaking of which, the plot twist is a great plot twist as well. So
I go ahead.
Huh?
Go ahead.
No, I said I really gotta give you credit on not just the film language, but the plot twist, the way the story unfolds, the way you were able to use the two actresses for a nice bulk of the film without us feeling like it was getting stale or boring. Like the film really just pulls you in and you're invested in seeing what the hell is going to happen.
Yeah, right. What the hell is this?
What's going to happen? And with that being said, because we did give it away. It was around the holidays. The film takes place around the holidays in Manhattan. So I guess it's not too much of a spoiler to say that the parade also happens in the film.
We don't ever mention the sponsor of the parade. It's just a parade.
A parade, right? So, but with that being said, was the parade really happening outside, or
it looks that way, doesn't it?
It really does.
Well, I was when we were shooting this in 2002. I said, well, I said, I'm going to have balloons in the window. I mean, I think I might have been high, but I was thinking, yeah, I'm going to have windows. I'm going to have balloons out there.
Mm-hmm.
And fortunately, a friend of mine from Eugene, Oregon,
mm-hmm.
who worked in a lab. Can you believe a town like Eugene, Oregon had a motion picture lab, 35, 16, Super 8. Can you imagine a small town? I mean,
there are jewels all around this place, this planet, but I can believe it.
And he was there, and I remember he was working at the lab. Then it turned out he was in the theater department,
mm-hmm.
and Cato was in the theater department also at the University of Oregon. I didn't know that at the time.
Wow.
Later on, but anyway, so I was making a film. The name of the film is called Dirt Ball, and so I took 100 feet of clear 16 millimeter film,
mm-hmm.
right? And I unspooled this thing, and I had a big box. And then I sprayed the box with all kinds of spray glue and stuff like that. So that, so it mists. It had formed a mist. And I shook this box up. And then me and my two kids, I took it. I walked it around the block. I just dragged this 100 feet of film behind me. And then I put it back in a box and I vacuumed the rug and emptied the vacuum stuff in the box, shook this whole thing up, right?
Yeah.
And then I re-spooled it. So normally about 100 feet of film looks like this, and when I was done, my 100 feet of film looked like this.
Right.
All this crap on there.
Right.
And so I took it to the lab, and Mark was there, and I said, I need a print of this. And he looked at it. He goes, well, we'll probably have to charge you about $20 to clean the printer. I went, oh, great. That's a bargain. Well, that's when I first met Mark. And so I have a print of that film.
Wow.
Anyway, I made a soundtrack for it too. And so when you project it and you hear the soundtrack, it was electric razors. I chased him around in a cardboard box. So the movie looks like your leg is asleep. If you can visualize that.
Right.
Anyway, that's when I first met Mark. And then he went on, after he left Oregon, and he was my DP on a lot of films.
Okay.
He worked in the industry as a key rigger. So he worked for studios.
Right.
And that's all. He was IATSE, and he retired, I think, 3 years ago. But in the meantime, he learned special effects. And so in 2001 and 2002, I need a bunch of balloons. And so he was the guy to do it. And so with his abilities with special effects, and I made a note, he did several of the cars that floated around in The Fifth Element with Bruce Willis. So I mean, he was accomplished. He was a pro. And so he built those balloons. And so I had to go back and take exact measurements. So depending on the camera shot, I had to go whichever direction that camera was pointed. I had to go and take measurements, because if it was in perspective, then the measurement here of the window is different than the window here.
Right.
And so I had to go and get all of this. And he says, measure the radiator, and he says the pipes, the window openings, etc. And you can see how exact they are.
It really is really done really well. Done really well. And he also did the special effects, like with like the newspaper in the beginning, the bullets and all that.
All of it.
Wow. I love it when plans really come together like that,
Yeah, it was just by happenstance. It's just, I didn't realize that that's what he was doing.
Right.
But when I did, I thought, well, hey, you got to do this if you can. And so he did. And I mean, it's absolutely beautiful. I mean, for the thing, it's an independent film.
Right.
And those are major effects. They look real. And a moment I love at the very end when Jeannie she's putting up the window to look out, the color changes on the balloon.
Yeah.
It goes from pulling this back in the window, it goes from that faded blue to bright blue, just for an instant, but that's the detail.
Exactly. The power's in the details. Me personally, I couldn't tell if it was really a parade happening outside or what. I actually thought that's what it was. I thought, they shot around the time of the parade and just got a few shots of, what was happening outside. So
yeah,
you can't tell at all.
Yeah. And one of the moments there, I won't give it away, but Kathy's character is in dire straits, and a giant pineapple floats by behind her. I mean, so that's that's kind of funny.
So you said that was one of the parts that would give it away. So
I don't want to say how dire her situation is.
Right. But the pineapple, though, you saying
there's a pineapple balloon that floats by the window.
Right. Now, but it looks like even the shots where you can see the balloon not only behind the window but the curtain. And
right.
It really looks like this thing is behind the curtain and the window. Like it's done really well. So. Yeah. You told us a little bit about your experience releasing the film. You had the limited theater release. You forwarded it in the city. I'm sure you took it on the road some, right?
No.
Not really? So what prompted the re-release? What prompted your re-release of the film?
Well, technology had improved from when we finished editing was 2006. So that's when it went around on a whole bunch of festivals. And it kind of quieted down, and then I think we tried to get it on Netflix. I got it to get on Netflix. Back in those days, you had to get your film independently put up on Netflix. You had to have 1,000 requests.
Okay.
For them to buy your movie.
Right.
And so if I figured, well, you know what I'm going to do? I made an exact replica of that small little envelope that the DVD is in.
Yep.
And you could, if you looked at my counterfeit and a real live Netflix envelope, you couldn't tell the difference.
Right.
It had Oswald information on it. That's all.
Right.
On Oswald, and then I got made up a red envelope, and I sent it to them. And they also require a book. I have this book I made. It's about 40 pages of all of at the time, all of the social media and all of the connections anything you could find on what was available at the time. There were pages of, I don't know, 30 pages of outreach, all kinds of documentation on terms of where it had been seen and not seen, crazy stuff like that, and sent them a copy, and they had it listed in their catalog.
Right.
And it kept said, one day I decided, oh wow, there it is. Holy cow, it's in Netflix. People can rent it. And I tried to rent it, and it said available soon. And then somehow I managed to find a number to talk to a human being. And they said, that's when I learned you had to have 1,000 requests.
Oh, I see. They'll list it, but you had to have the request. I remember when Netflix first came out, you were renting the DVD and they were mailing it to you.
Yeah. So I just counterfeited and see what I could do.
Right.
I got in the door, but I didn't have 1,000 requests.
Right.
So anyway, in 2016, technology has changed a lot. I mean, a lot.
A whole lot.
That's right. And so there was some things, just some cleanup that had to be done at one point or another. Little things like if you see a brand name someplace, right?
Yeah.
So anywhere where there was a brand name, I hired somebody to erase it.
Yeah.
And if there was if there was a weird shadow or something you wouldn't normally catch, but if you were looking at every frame, you might see something. So whatever it was, we'd erase it. And then we'd have to match the color. You know how it is, because you're going back through and making those corrections. And so that was basically cleanup of anything that smelled or even hinted at some sort of name, brand, anything, because who wants to be connected to a movie that plans to assassinate the CEO of spend all your money.
Right. With a brand in it at the same time, right?
Exactly.
Right.
So and Macy's name can't be on the balloons.
Right.
It said Acme.
Right.
Acme balloon.
So you so after all of this, you decided, since you did all of that work, you're going to re-release it.
Well, yeah, we thought we didn't know quite what we were going to do with it, but now it's cleaned up. It still needs to go through one more preservation step before it's fully preserved. And a board member, Sandra Schulberg, and I think you met her. Her whole life right now is about preserving independent films. And she says, for all of you filmmakers out there who have got films on drives, if your drive is older than 5 years old, you're playing with fire, because it can quit at any time.
Right.
You can lose everything. You can't. You have to if you're going to keep it on drives, you have to keep buying new drives and keep updating, and you have to keep moving that file around.
Right.
But the only way to preserve it is what she does. And so that is, individual frames, the same way that Mark Whitney made those balloons, those giant JPEG files, right? They're huge. And that's how you have to preserve your film one frame at a time.
Wow.
And then you can make it, you can put it back, you can release it digitally, you can put it back on the film or whatever. But that's another step that has to happen down the road to preserve it, because otherwise all those digits will one day disappear.
Right. So let me ask you, what's your final plans for Be My Oswald? So right now, I just want to remind the audience, you can watch this film as part of the Queens World Film Festival's virtual leg. The link is in the description on Film Festival Flicks. The link to the exact film, you can just go right in the description. It's there for you. What's your plans for this film after you do your final?
Well, I eventually would like to have it preserved. I'd like to take it and see what it looks like screened once it's been preserved on the motion picture film on a 35 millimeter frame size. Right. That's what and what happens after that, I don't know. But I think it's a worthwhile piece to have that happen. I mean, I mean, we shot all kinds of different media. And, we shot. I have a list here. We shot Super 8, regular 8 millimeter, DV cam, 16 millimeters, Super 16, and PAL DV. And it was transferred. We dealt with Digibeta and various Avid is what we edited on at the time, which is half inch. And the reason we chose PAL, or I chose PAL, is one, because of the aspect ratio, and it was the highest resolution you could get at the time without spending a fortune for a broadcast. Well, PAL is broadcast for European TV, so it had more lines of information, which is what I wanted. I wanted a little bit higher resolution, and it's not perfectly 16 by 9, so that I can also play with that aspect ratio as well.
And all right, so you're going to preserve it. I would imagine you're going to release it digitally, right?
Well, then I would do something else. Then I could re-release it because it's timeless.
Exactly.
I mean, there's a few things that dated, but the hallway when they come out with the computer.
Well, payphones.
Yeah, payphones. Right.
But that's always a pleasure to see things like that. It's always a pleasure to see payphones, since people need to know those existed at once.
Yeah.
When I see payphones, like in my travels, I'm always like, I always like take note of that payphone.
Yeah. So it's dated, but nonetheless, the idea is timeless.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not dated in a way where, like you said, it's the idea. It's not dated in a way where it's like, oh, this is not relevant, right? It's dated in the sense that, okay, this was filmed at this time, and there's nothing wrong with that. Nothing at all.
No. And so it's a process. That's it. I mean, I'm thrilled to have it screened on Film Festival Flicks as part of our offering with the Film Festival.
Right.
I mean, I think it's the perfect place for it, and digital is just wonderful.
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen it. We have our world premiere was at the Westwood Theater in Los Angeles, and I mean, it had been just recently restored. So this theater that was built, I guess, back in either the 30s or the 40s, had been completely restored. It was in a Jim Carrey movie because it's gorgeous. On a huge screen, and I don't know, maybe 1,000 seats. I don't remember, 800 seats. It was a huge place. It was beautiful.
Right.
And to see it on that screen, and the best we could do then digitally was Digibeta, Betamax, not Betamax. Big things about this big.
You're not talking about the disc, though, are you?
No. This was the digital tape. Anyway, look, it was a knockout. It was just beautiful, and I remember I asked them, the film festival, and I asked them. I said, "Well, why did you select this?" And they said, "Well, we were fast forwarding the film, like we fast forward. That's what they did. They said we fast forward the film, and we got to a point where we saw somebody in a rowboat."
Yeah. Seen two
people in a rowboat, and they went, "Wait a minute, I think I need to watch this," and that's how we got into the film festival. There's these two people in the same rowboat,
right?
And it's very important who those two people are.
Yeah, that's why I just kept quiet, because I don't know if I should give it away. I think people, you need to go watch the film. The link is in the description. You need to go see it. We're trying to tell you but without telling you everything. We don't want to spoil it. But this film, like I said, is very well done. If you enjoy great acting, if you enjoy plot, if you enjoy dark humor, if you just enjoy, mind-bending type of films as well, if you enjoy just a great story, you're going to enjoy this. And
if you got pissed off, that works too.
Exactly.
A reaction is a reaction.
Yeah, like I said, great pieces of art, great pieces of work. Either people either love them or hate them. I hardly hear any like in between. You know,
Yeah, I mean, because you got a reaction from somebody.
exactly, and that's our goal as creators, right? We want to provoke emotion. We want to
Yeah, and you can learn a lot from somebody's anger. I mean, you can find out what their hangups are or aren't. I mean, you can enjoy that particular kind of feedback. If you know, at first when you put so much into it, and you want everybody to like your movie,
hmm
and you go and somebody comes along and throws a turd at your face. Well, you just have to think, well, why did he do that?
hmm
What touched it off, and why did he make it so personal?
Right,
Ah, maybe it really touched him. Maybe it touched him or her,
right,
and maybe it just set him off or her off. And so, what part? I don't know. All of it, some of it.
right.
But I could say, I could tell you one thing, and what you said about the beginning, how it kind of you get this comfort feeling, right?
hmm
And there's a point where suddenly it takes a sharp turn.
Right.
And
Because in the beginning, it's like you're following the main character, and you know their mission in the beginning is nothing like what the mission in the end ends up being, right? So
right,
yeah,
and
yeah,
it's in it, and two, it's an anti-gun piece.
yeah,
I mean, that's what she says, right?
yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
And it's I don't want to say anymore because I feel like I'm about to get into details. I was gonna say something about that, but I'm gonna let you guys see it. If you haven't seen it, please do yourself a favor and watch this film. And if you have family members like you who may have the same taste in movies, then I think this is something you're gonna want to share with them as we go from Thanksgiving into Christmas. Even though this is a film about the commercialism of Christmas, we'll say that much. All right, and
yeah. It's about twisting something specifically for. It's a myth.
it's a myth.
It's a myth.
It's a
It's
myth.
and so it's you put the myth, and she says it, and when the big lie, when the new lie becomes the new truth,
hmm
and haven't we heard that? When the
Absolutely.
new lie becomes the new truth.
I like that. So with that being said, we're gonna leave you with that. We're gonna leave everybody with that. It's been a pleasure talking to you, Preston. Hope to talk sooner than later. I know we're wrapping up the virtual leg of this film festival, and hopefully we'll all be able to get some rest after this. Right? Look at his face. I want to say hello and salute to Katha in the chat. I forgot about the rowboat. Salute to everybody who pulled up. Richard, salute to you as well. And the people who pulled up and didn't say anything. I saw you guys. Please click the like and share as well. I really appreciate this talk. And yeah, once again, everybody go hit the link in the description and watch this film. All right. Do
Yeah,
yourself
have a glass of wine and a chuckle, or a beer, or have popcorn.
a favor. Yeah, I have popcorn. It's been great. I'll talk to you sooner than later. And
Yeah,
I'm going to go watch some films. I don't know about the people in the audience, but I'm about to go watch some films
yeah.
on filmfestivalflix.com. Have a great night. Have a great night.
You too, everyone else out there. Ho ho, bang.
Bang. All right. See you later, Don. Talk to you later. All right. Tell Katha I say hello as well.
Right over there.
Hey, Katha. All right. Have a good one. All right. Peace, everybody.
B says hi.
Peace. All right.